Hi, everybody. Today I'm just going to try to cover a little bit about the second essay and the second test so that you can start to study. Okay, so let me get to the prompt that I also sent on this email. Let me share my screen. All righty. Okay, let's see. All right, here we go. First of all, I hope all of you are doing okay. It's been kind of a crazy couple of weeks, hasn't it? And I know some of you are really struggling and really busy, and I just want to let you know that I'm really, really proud of you, and we'll get through this together. Okay, so the second test will look very, very much like the first test. I will give you 7 passages from the color purple, and only the color purple. That's the only thing that we've really covered and read so far, is the color purple this time around. So I will give you 7 passages from the color purple. You pick 5, pretty similar to the first test. Here are what the directions will look like. I want you to identify who is speaking and to whom, if it is a direct quote, or to whom what the passage is referring. Please be specific. If there is a reference to a her or him, tell me who this is, especially like, you know, in the color purple. Please don't just say, it's Seeley writing a letter to God, you know, because sometimes it's Nettie speaking, and sometimes it's Shug, and sometimes it's Sophia, and sometimes it's Mr., and you get the hint. Okay, so please try to be as specific as possible. The significance of the passage by telling me where in the plot the scene takes place, so kind of where in the novel, why it is a pivotal moment or important moment in the story. And also, as I said in the first test, and a lot of you did really, really well with this, those of you who didn't get the score you wanted, typically it's because you stopped at this point. You stopped at telling me, you know, paraphrasing the passage, telling me like, this is the part of the novel that took place, done. You know, if you want, you know, an A on your test, then I also would like you to try to articulate how this passage reinforces or explains a major theme of the work. Go deeper than mere paraphrasing. Give evidence of analysis. This can include making connections between the passage and other parts of the novel. So if it's like later in the novel and you make a connection to something that happened earlier, wonderful. Or between the novel and other texts read for class, if you're making connections between The Color Purple and Marina, or The Color Purple and Handmaid's Tale, beautiful. Please try to explain that connection. Some of you just went, this is like The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, thanks. Can you explain that a little bit deeper? Okay, or between the passages and specific historical, cultural, philosophical themes addressed in the novel. So for example, if you wanted to bring in Liberia, the creation of Liberia and its relationship with Firestone, and kind of make that connection while talking about Olinka, the Olinka tribe, great, that's making a connection. You know, we've talked about that in our discussion boards. There's a reason I throw all those videos out at you, because, you know, I'm trying to get you to make some of those connections. Also think about the article from Collins, Patricia Collins, that we read together on hegemonic masculinity. So any connection to that would be fantastic. So I'm hoping that that gives you some clues, if that's what I mean by analysis. Like you're taking this passage, you're saying this is really important to the novel, but let's look deeper and see all the different connections you can make. So I'm hoping you can see there's like, you know, taking it this far, and then taking it this far. And this far gets you the most points. Okay, you have until Sunday, October 25th at 10:30 p.m. So I'm gonna give you until 2 weeks, basically 2 weekends to study and get ready for this test and also the essay. To both take the test and turn in the essay. Please get this essay into turnitin.com through Canvas. These are the topics for your second out-of-class essay assignment. Choose one of the following and write an essay that is 2 to 3 pages, so about the same length as last time, although of course it can be longer. Here are some excerpts from Hegemonic Masculinity and Black Gender Ideology by Patricia Hill Collins that may prove useful in giving background information on these essay questions, especially the first one and the second questions. So if you want to read those are on the prompts. And just kind of wanted to remind you some of the important passages. Question number 1. In the article, Hegemonic Masculinity and Black Gender Ideology, Patricia Collins writes, hegemonic masculinity, and please remember what hegemonic masculinity is. that is the social normed, highest, most successful male position in society. Does that make sense? Okay. So hegemonic masculinity in the United States has several benchmarks. For one, real men are primarily defined as not being like women. Men who accept this dimension of dominant gender ideology require control over women, which takes many forms in order to know that they are real men. Think back even to like The Handmaid's Tale, right? Like that was some of the commanders, justification for the creation of Gilead, right? Men didn't have control over women and they just didn't feel like they had much value anymore. They just weren't really involved in life anymore if they didn't have some kind of control over women. Okay, since African-American men historically have been denied access to reaching the same levels of authority and control as white privileged men, the mechanisms to controlling and dominating Black women, quote unquote, seem designed to shake the stigma of weakness. This is what Patricia Hill says. In The Color Purple, discuss how some of, not all, remember, not all the male characters, Samuel, for example, the preacher, he doesn't seem to need this to exert control over Corinne, his first wife, and then Nettie, right? So in The Color Purple, discuss how some of the Black male characters see dominating women as an important element to establishing their masculinity. What forms does this control and domination take? What are the results of such domination in the relationships between women and men? What are the results to the men's own psychological, emotional development and success and happiness? Because again, sometimes we get into the habit of thinking patriarchy works for men, right? It doesn't work for women, but patriarchy works for men. And I think both Handmaid's Tale and The Color Purple are trying to question that, that assumption. I think what this novel is clearly showing is that kind of domination doesn't work for men either, that it doesn't really lead to their long-term happiness. You may want to focus on or analyze one particular male character in this novel and his attempts to control, dominate the women around him, or you could choose to analyze the different ways of controlling and dominating and use the various male characters and their relationships as evidence. So there's a couple of different ways of approaching this, I wouldn't try to cover everything that happens in this novel because then it's just going to be, well, one, really long and not very in depth. So just figure out a way that you can make this like a deep analysis of that way for men in this novel to kind of establish their masculinity. Number 2, examine the relationship between Celie and Shug. And this is going to be a whoop, whoop, watch out. I'm about to reveal stuff that happens in the rest of the novel. So you might want to just skip ahead if you don't want to get a little hint, a little foreshadowing of what's to come. Okay, just warning. Examine the relationship between Celie and Shug. How does their relationship compare contrast to the heterosexual and often male dominant relationships in the novel? If this relationship is not based on control and exerting one's will over another, what is it based on? And in what ways and why is the relationship not presented as the perfect relationship? Be sure to examine Shug's last fling and Celie's reaction to it. Okay, so that gives you a little hint about what's to come. So it would be very, very easy for Alice Walker to, Alice Walker herself is bisexual. She's had relationships with men. She's had relationships with women. And so she could paint in this novel very easily that the relationship between two women is sort of ideal and a utopian, right? She doesn't. She resists that the relationship between Celie and Shug is just as complex and in many ways just as imperfect as any heterosexual relationship. And yet she does seem to want to argue that it's based on something other than controlling and dominating each other. Okay. Number 3, contemplate how religion, spirituality, theology works in this novel, both to oppress and then to liberate the characters. Pay close attention to Celie's initial relationship with her church and the other church members, pay attention to that, as well as to the God that she addresses her letters, at least at first, right? Then focus on Shug's spiritual beliefs and how those influence Celie. How has Celie's spirituality evolved throughout this novel, and where is it by the end of the novel? Number 4, why do you think Alice Walker sends Nettie to Africa, Liberia? What is Nettie hoping she finds there? What are the lessons she learns about race, about tribalism, about being a woman that she might not have learned had she stayed in Southern USA? I think in the discussion boards, we talked a little bit about like tribalism. in every country, right, there is this emphasis on people who are in the tribe and people who are out of the tribe. You know, it just happens that in this country, that often comes down to race. It's not true for every country, right? Race isn't always the like really major deciding factor on who's in and who's not in positions of power. Sometimes this might be the language you speak in some countries. Others, it might be like literally tribes that you've belonged to, your families belong to for millennia, you know. This might be socioeconomic status, if that makes sense, everybody. Okay, so it just happens that race is one of the major ways in which we in this country, because of our history with slavery, honestly, that we sort of position people who are in, who are out of power. You know, in some other countries, like in this particular tribe, it's gender who gets to have power and who doesn't get to have power. Okay, so one thing, again, I was sort of interested is that, like Celie and Shug, Alice Walker could have painted Africa as being like a utopia. You know, finally they leave racist, you know, United States of America, especially in the 1930s. They go to Africa where this is sort of, you know, they don't know exactly because their ancestors were slaves, but they're sort of native land. And still, it's not a perfect fit for Nettie. So I want you to explore that. Why exactly send Nettie to Africa? What does she learn there? Number 5, come up with your own thesis. This essay must cover the color purple, or your project must cover the color purple. Make sure it is arguing a point in the thesis, not merely giving information. And please remember, a more creative interpretation, music, visual art is absolutely appreciated and acceptable. If you're thinking about creating your own thesis or prompt or creating a project, please give me a heads up on your idea before you commit time and effort. When you turn in your creative project, you can drop it off at my office or upload it to Canvas. You must also write an artist interpretation. The artist's interpretation will be 1 page in length and include any quotes, passages, scenes from the story that inspired you. It is also a chance to tell me what you were trying to accomplish with your work of art. For example, if you used certain colors, why? If you made certain lighting choices when using photography, what effect were you going for? This will help me see what you want me to see. Okay, so please keep that in mind. If you're like so tired of writing, you're just want to gouge your eyes out, there's so many different possibilities with the color purple. I had a student one time who wrote his own blues music. He was a music major and it was amazing, you know, really taking from the blues, really understanding what the blues is all about, writing his own lyrics, having a friend sing it. It was amazing, you know, really tying all the elements, the themes. It was great. So think outside the box here. I want to give you the opportunity of reacting to this novel in ways other than writing. We do so much writing in this class. So keep that in mind. I would love to, you've got 2 weekends to kind of play around with this. Okay, this essay is more formal than journals, so be aware of common college level expectations, like there should be an introduction and a thesis, body paragraphs that support the thesis, conclusion that does more, I hope, than merely summarizing the points. Remember that you need to use specific examples from the novel, specific quotes. 15 to 20% should be direct quotes, but not more. You know, if you have like 90% of your paper is direct quotes, that's usually a red flag to me that we didn't really write those, you copy and pasted from the novel. Remember that persistent grammar errors, you know, if I have to stop every couple of sentences and correct a grammar mistake, then I get grumpy. And when I get grumpy, I'm not as generous with my grades. And that's just the honest truth. So make sure that you try to clean that up. If you need to, take it to the Writing Center. And I here give you the link. I would be happy to consult with you. Just, you know, you got to give me a little bit of time. Sometimes this next week I should have things cleared up a little bit better after midterm grades are turned in on Monday. I hope to get a lot of the grading. I'm just going to knock out. I've been working like 10, 12-hour days trying to knock out all this grading. It's been kind of miserable, but I'm going to get through it. I promise. So next week I should have a clearer docket. So please, please, please let me know if I can help. Here's the, you know, I'm not going to go through all of this, but here's an important part. Okay. When quoting from The Color Purple, avoid quoting like this. On page 270, Mr. says, "But Shug spoke right up for you, Celie," he say. She say, "Albert, you've been mistreating somebody I love." That's a little wonky, right? Because what happens in The Color Purple is that Celie will say, she say, he say. And so if you're quoting from a person she quotes from, it gets really kind of confusing. If possible, quote more like this. Instead, say like, Mr. reminisces with Celie, telling her, like, again, frame that quote. If you just throw a quote in, sometimes I don't know where it's coming from or why it's important. So try to give a little bit of an introduction, like, Mr. reminisces with Celie, telling her, but Shug spoke right up for you, Celie, ... She say, Albert, you've been mistreating somebody I love. So you're giving a direct quote from Mr. and you're taking out the he say, because that's what Celie was writing, right? That's not exactly the quote from Mr. So if you can do that, then that reads a lot more smoothly than jamming it all, quoting directly from the novel. The 3 dots, the ellipses, that signals your reader, I took something out. It's not important, reader, don't worry, but I took something out so this sentence could flow a little bit better. So instead of writing he say, which is confusing for your readers, replace the words with ellipses. If you're using a version of the novel that is not the hard copy, the one that I told you to buy, please include MLA Works Cited and page number so I can find your version, just in case I need to check your quotes. Every once in a while, my students will give a quote and I'm like, that's not from The Color Purple. I'm not sure where you got it from, but it's not from The Color Purple. Usually they're quoting like Spark Notes and I'm like, don't cheat, please. Okay. If you're using the one I am, include page numbers, but don't worry about including the works cited page. I already know where it's coming from. So if you're using the novel I told you to buy, don't worry about writing a works cited page. Like, I don't need that. I know where you're getting your information from. If you're using a version of the novel that is different from the one I told you to buy, then include a works cited page, because then I'll be able to find that version and then make sure that the quotes are correct. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I hope everybody is taking care. Remember, you've got, 2 weekends, okay? All right, take care, everybody.